So the Senate Democrats correctly voted down the GOP's supposed kind of coronavirus stimulus package, and they voted it down for the obvious reasons that it's just a huge giveaway to these massive corporations while doing very little to actually help the most vulnerable and marginalized due to this coronavirus pandemic. So this plan would have given basically $500 slush fund, I should say, to Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, where he would have huge control over what businesses get those funds. He would also be able to decide whether these companies would be able to buy back their own stocks, which most Democrats are against, because it's just basically allowing those same corporations to further enrich themselves while getting all this funding from the government. So Mnuchin would get discretion on that, and him being previously part of the financial sector. He was the former head of One West Bank, which had a huge just kind of foreclosure and corruption crisis while he was the head of that. He's obviously going to be on the side of those corporations wanting to let them buy back their stock. So that was one of the reasons it was voted down, as well as the fact that the economic aspect of it that was supposedly to help average everyday working people was just a huge slap in the face compared to the scale of the crisis that we're facing. It would only give people $1,200 checks, and that's if you made a certain amount of money. If you made, I think it's less than $50K last year, then you get like $600, and if you had no income, you get zero. Obviously, that makes no sense at all. The people with the least amount of wealth, resources, or income in the country should be the ones getting the highest rate of the payments. It shouldn't be the opposite. And then, as well as the fact that these companies who would be getting bailed out by the U.S. government, and obviously that's me and you, the U.S. taxpayer, would only have to limit executive pay for 2 years. That needs to be, however long they're, getting bailed out by the U.S. government, by the U.S. people. They would have to cap it for that, would be my opinion, as well as Mnuchin would be able to withhold the names of the companies that are getting these bailouts, as well as the amount, for up to 6 months. So all of those reasons that, it's just a huge handout to these corporations with basically no strings attached, as well as the fact that it doesn't actually help most Americans out, or most people in the U.S. out in any real substantive way, especially the people who need it the most. So kudos to the Democrats for voting it down. And there's a lot of already really pretty strong and robust and progressive plans out there that have actually been presented by different members of the House and the Senate. So for example, Rashida Tlaib came out with this idea of having the U.S. mint basically these platinum coins, and then that funding, and it wouldn't add to the debt. I mean, I'm not honestly concerned about the debt right now, but for those folks that are, this wouldn't add anything to the debt, and people would get these prepaid cards with $2,000 on them, and then $1,000 for each month after, until a year after we've recovered from that, and includes kids, non-citizens, so everybody would get that $2,000 and then the $1,000 after that until a year after the economy recovers. And then, as well as, I thought it was a really good point she made in her plan about engaging in this emergency outreach to make sure that everybody has access to these cards, and the homeless folks, people living in cars or shelters, to make sure that they would also be able to have access to those funds. So that's awesome. And then we have Bernie Sanders. From what I could tell, his is the most just kind of robust and all-encompassing plan I've been able to find. So he's calling each person in the U.S. $2K a month for the duration of the crisis. That's super important, a lot more than what the Republicans are are advocating for, just that really crappy one-time payment, and doesn't even, cover people with no income, or people under 50K a year get even less. Obviously, that makes no sense at all. Covering all medical treatment, testing, the vaccine, implementing the Defense Production Act, increasing healthcare capacity, not allowing small and medium-sized businesses to go under. The federal government, under Bernie's plan, would work with these businesses to provide them cash to cover all payroll costs. That's awesome. Expanding unemployment insurance to up to 100%, up to $75,000 a year. That's amazing. Emergency paid family and sick leave, expanding food assistance programs, while the Trump administration recently has been trying to cut the very important SNAP program that's already, doesn't cover enough people, or doesn't give them, enough resources to put high quality food on the table for them and their families. Moratorium on evictions, foreclosures need to also, and one of the things that Bernie's plan doesn't cover is rent needs to be suspended during this time, along with, he calls for mortgage payments being suspended, but rent needs to be suspended as well, because the fact is a lot more people rent than actually own their homes. Waiving student loan payments, developing more emergency shelters, protecting farmers, expanding the healthcare capacity so we actually have, the hospital space, the ventilators, the mask, all these things to address it from a public health perspective. Bernie is on top of it, and as well as the economic aspect. The only suggestion I would have for Bernie's plan is that the rent payments need to be suspended during this time as well. And then, if it's maybe just somebody who has a couple of properties, then maybe the government could, help them out, but then they'll also be getting that cash. So that's one of the suggestions I would have for Bernie's plan, but obviously that is by far and away exponentially better than anything the GOP or the Republican Party or Mnuchin or Trump has been proposing that will actually help people from a public health, from a healthcare perspective, as well as from an economic perspective as well. Rashida Tlaib's plan is pretty good. I would just like to see the $2K a month be extended through the duration, because honestly, $1,000 a month doesn't go very far for most people if they're still having to, pay things like their rent. And then, and then Barbara Lee in the House also came out with a good plan. I believe hers was somewhat similar to Bernie's, with the $2K a month for the duration of this economic crisis that we're experiencing due to the coronavirus. There's lots of really strong ideas out there. So Ro Khanna had came out with a plan previously that had to do with the earned income tax credit. But from all the plans I've seen, Bernie's is the most kind of robust and all-encompassing, and really addresses these issues. He even talks about protecting farmers, building emergency shelters, expanding food assistance, expanding unemployment insurance, helping out small and medium-sized businesses, $2K a month for everybody for the duration of the crisis, covering all treatment, testing, and vaccine, increasing healthcare capacity, really actually using the Defense Production Act, which Trump hasn't done at all, which is just criminal in my opinion. So, kudos to the Democratic senators. I believe it was all but one voted no against this really horrible coronavirus stimulus package that was just a huge bailout to these corporations, while leaving behind the working people and the most vulnerable and marginalized of us within the United States. And really hope, something like Lee's plan or Bernie's plan gets adopted and voted for in the House, and then it would be up to the Republicans then to vote it down, and then everybody and all of these Democratic politicians needs to call it out, like, you're not voting on this robust plan that's going to literally save people's lives so they'd be able to still put food on the table, so they're not able to pay their rent and all these things. You're voting against that. It's criminal. You're okay with people dying and suffering. Just really hit them really hard if they're not going to support this, in the Senate. So just my 2 cents. Share yours in the comment sections down below. Peace. Much love.